Okay, yes, we've resolved all technicals. Let's get started. So good afternoon, everyone joining in Prague, but also at home, distributed across Europe and the rest of the world. And welcome to this third session at the Eurodoc Conference 2021, hosted by SKRVS. First, we need to start by congratulating Eva, Mariana, and the other conference organizers for putting together a hybrid conference, which does not mean half the number of problems, it means twice as many, and you should be proud of managing to get together an excellent list of speakers too, which we'll have plenty of exposure to in the next hour and a half. So my name is Mathew Tata. I'm a current Eurodoc board member and also the co-coordinator of the Employment and Career Development Working Group. And today I'm delighted to welcome 5 speakers whose expertise and work addresses key issues pertaining to the career development of early career researchers, the title for this session. So we're talking precarity, practice, policy, and in some cases we'll also discuss some postdocs too. So in case you haven't attended the previous sessions today, I'll just go over some basic housekeeping and clarify also the program lying ahead until 5:30 Central European Summertime. So if anyone in Prague can maybe put up the slide with some of the rules for today's session, that would be wonderful. But in short, our speakers will each present for 15 minutes, leaving us with approximately 30 minutes of Q&A from 5 p.m. And after 15 minutes, as the speakers are aware, I will briefly inform them that they have 1 more minute left. I hope they understand that's just in the interest of keeping to time and having opportunity for an expansive Q&A at the end. So whilst I'm speaking to you from Stockholm, Sweden, we obviously have a socially distanced audience there in Prague in the Czech Republic. And of course, you outside joining us virtually, don't let that geographical distance stop you from joining in the conversation. So this is Zoom. We're probably quite familiar with it already, but you're aware there is a chat box. Post your comments there. If you have questions, use the Q&A function. Really, that's the place to use it, not the chat. And also make sure you upvote others' questions so we can see which issues and ideas really are the most widely shared amongst you in the audience. And indeed, if you actually want to pose a question in person, raise your hand digitally and someone in Prague from the back end of this session will upgrade you to a panelist and you will then be able to switch on your microphone and camera. Great, so that's all out the way. So just quickly run through our list of speakers today. We'll start first with Filomena Parada, Task Force Coordinator in the Eurodoc Employment and Career Development Working Group. She's followed by Masia, Executive Coordinator of the Initiative for Science in Europe, known as ISE. Then we will hear from Alexandra Batuchikova and Kamila Borsekova from Matej University and coordinators of the Horizon 2020 funded project DocEnhance. And last but not least, Eurodoc is delighted to welcome Apostolia Karamali, Head of Unit for Academic R&I in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Good, so let's move on to our first speaker, which is Filomena. So Filomena Parada has been a volunteer in Eurodoc since 2008, serving as Vice President and Working Group Coordinator along the way, amongst other roles. She's also represented Eurodoc in the OECD Global Science Forum's recent project on research precarity. Beyond Eurodoc, Filomena works as a researcher in the Department of Education at the University of Helsinki. And her talk today is entitled Eurodoc Postdoc Survey, Key Findings about the Employment Conditions of Postdoctoral Researchers Working in Europe. So Filomena, the stage is yours.
Okay, solved. Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute myself. So now I was kind of like seeing how I could best do it. It's my pleasure to be here with such a distinct group of panelists and give you all a preview on the key findings from the Eurodoc Postdoc Survey report. The report will be coming out soon, and it was launched in 2008 and planned by the board and the working group on employment and career development at Eurodoc. The aim of the survey was to make an in-depth characterization of the population of researchers at the postdoctoral stage of their careers working in Europe. And it was structured around these 6 topics that you can see there in the screen. I won't be able to present results on all the topics, only a few selected results. And as you will see, there will be already a lot of results. Also, as you can see in the slide, the data were collected between October 2018 and February 2019, which makes this pre-COVID data. And in our view, its advantage is that it shows how serious the situation of postdocs was already before the pandemic. Why look into postdocs? To start with, there's no consensual definition of what a postdoc is. In the project, we are using the following definition for postdocs: all researchers with a doctoral degree that are not yet fully independent and are in non-standard employment. And the definition itself already covers the heterogeneity of situations and the ambiguity of roles and employment circumstances of this population, that also accounts for the fact that they are undercounted and have recently been called the research precariat. Precarity is undoubtedly what dominates the employment of these researchers, and is because of the awareness of the seriousness of the problem that OECD recently launched this report, that reducing the precarity of research careers, and used the expression research precariat to talk about postdoctoral researchers work, especially those working in academia. The project was a 2-year project and had 2 workshops. In 2020, Julia Malaguernera, Eurodoc president, did a presentation on open science. And in 2019, because I was representing Eurodoc in the project, I did another presentation. The links provide you access to the report and all the presentations in the workshops. In my presentation at the time, I focused on what we call the postdoc paradox. That has to do with the fact that there are major issues like access to welfare, for example, that require postdocs to be almost superhuman workers, and then a ton of daily hassles that make them almost invisible at the institutional level, but not only. And the survey taps into these dimensions of the problem. So I will now start discussing in detail the survey, starting with who are the participants. The participants are approximately 1,800 researchers that self-define as R2 researchers. This means recognized researchers, researchers that, according to the European Commission typology for research careers, are researchers that have a PhD or equivalent, but are not yet fully independent. To know more about the typology, please use the link in the slide. I really don't have time to go through everything here today now. There was a wide geographic representation, more than 34 countries in terms of nationality and more than 30 countries in terms of where they were working, a balanced gender distribution. The majority was between 31 and 35 years, and also a majority of more than 2/3 were up to 5 years from receipt of doctorate. And this is what we mean by academic age. More than 70% were in a relationship and 23% had children. In relation to some of the numbers I've just provided you, some additional information about their distribution in terms of country where they work, which then we grouped into 4 regions: North, South, East and West of Europe, following the UN geoschematic scheme for organizing Europe. Then we organized into 3 groups, also based on this for academic age, also based on this distribution that you can see in here. Additional important information about who are the survey participants concerns the type of institution for which they conduct research, and you have there the distribution in terms of the main organizations at which they are based, their funding sources, and we've highlighted project-based funding, institution-scored funding, and own funding. And then in terms of the research field, and then for the research field, we use the OECD classification for research fields, and these are the fields that we've used also. Now for the results. Starting with stability of employment and funding. And these are quite important in our view. 41% have had 3 or more temporary contracts. About 80%, when they answered the survey, had less than 2 years remaining in their position. 89% were full-time employed, 42% declared having no specifications about number of hours of work per week, and of those that had specific mentions having specifications, 90% worked 33 hours a week, with a very large percentage working 40 to 50 hours a week. What does this slide mean? It means that we wanted to better understand these trends. So we tried to see differences in the distributions according to a number of variables: gender, region of Europe, academic age, field of research, and type of funding. And here are the differences we identified for region of Europe and academic age. The upward green arrows means that researchers that come, for example, researchers that come from the north of Europe, that are based in the north of Europe, are more likely than their peers to have a full-time employment contract without exclusivity clause. And for example, that researchers in the south are more likely to have had more than 4 temporary contracts. Those that are the red downward arrows mean the opposite, that those in that group for that particular item are less likely to have said yes or to tick the box. When we say more likely, does not mean that the general trends do not apply to them, only that in comparison to their peers, it's more likely that they say yes or tick the box. And this is very important. We think that in here, we already start to have some interesting differences in terms of region of Europe, in terms of stability of employment, and also in terms of academic age. What are what is it that we can expect to find? Now, in terms of institution, and I would like to highlight the differences that we found in terms of type of contract for disciplines, with researchers in the social sciences and the humanities being in way more precarious situation than their peers. Access to welfare. What you have here is the percentage of answers yes to each one of those specific social provisions. Overall, what is it that we can conclude? That only about half of the respondents have access to welfare, and not here in the graph, but the only provision for which we found gender differences was parental leave, with female researchers being more likely to have access to parental leave than their male counterparts. And this is also, again, a very significant result when it comes to equality. Region of Europe, again, differences in terms of region. And again, we start to see very clearly a north-south divide. And here I'd like to highlight the circumstances of those that have a PhD for a shorter period of term, 1 to 3 years. They are less likely to have access to unemployment benefits, and they are more likely to answer, I don't know. And this trend of being more likely to answer, I don't know, will show up also in other responses, which is also quite a significant piece of information. Regarding field of research, again, differences, and then bear in mind that there were already differences in terms of the institutions that were more, in which these researchers were more like, some of these researchers were more likely to be working, which may also have something to do with these kinds and indicate different practices in terms of hiring. And then thinking about clarity of rights and duties at the start of the position. And again, some really worrying signs. If you look at the graphs, you can see that the majority had either partially defined or unclear rights and duties at the start of their position. And when it comes to the opportunity to be represented in institutional governance, the clear majority said that they either did not know if it was possible or did not have access to such representation. Only a very reduced number of respondents said yes. And then the differences in terms of region. And again, we can see the north-south divide in terms of clarity of rights, duties. And then institutional governance, we do have a very curious result, which is roles are clearer for the north, but these are also the ones that are more likely to not know if they are allowed to participate in institutional governance. And obviously the south is always where the trend is more negative again. And then this very unique result, it was the only difference we got concerning field of research for these particular items for medical and health sciences. In terms of academic age, we see again the lack of clarity and the lack of knowledge on those that have a PhD for 1 to 3 years. And then a very curious finding here, because those 4 to 5 years say that are more likely to say they have the opportunity to be represented in institutional government. And then those with more than 6 years or more say that they do not have the opportunity. And this is a very curious finding that we would like to hear you on. Now for career support, and from now on, we will only be presenting general trends. This variable and the following were probably the ones for which we found the highest number of differences according to these different groups: gender, region of Europe, field of research, academic age, and type of funding. And we simply did not have the time. And more importantly, we think that these trends are significant and speak for themselves, and so we need to pay them a lot of attention. So career support, almost half of the respondents said that they felt that did not have adequate support from their institutions when it came to career guidance or advice. And then the majority did not know or did not have access to an office that provided support to postdocs or other researchers in their institutions. And this is particularly serious if we look at the clarity of career plans, because what we get is that more than half either does not have clear plans or have somewhat clear plans. In fact, we have more than 2/3 of the respondents. For those that have plans, or what are their plans in general, to be precise, is to be researchers. And the large majority, if they could, they would like to stay in a researcher role, either inside or outside academia. And obviously the professorship also comes up as a very valued career aim. How difficult did they felt their goals would be to achieve? Well, again, nearly 2/3 of the respondents said that these goals would be either difficult or very difficult to achieve. And then in terms of barriers, we are only giving you the percentages for the answers that indicate that this is either a very serious or a serious barrier for each one of these items. And then again, as you can see, the majority considers the first three points: lack of employment opportunities, structure of research career, and absence of careers, as serious or very serious barriers to their career progress. Also, in a lesser extent, lack of career guidance. So this is quite a complex picture that shows that things were not looking bright for early career researchers that were at the postdoctoral stage of their careers, and that clearly show the precarity of the employment conditions in which they are hired, which makes the following recommendation quite obvious: offer stable career prospects based on standard employment conditions. And what do we mean by standard employment conditions? We follow OECD definition. That means full-time dependent employment contracts, either of indefinite duration or with prospects of continuity becoming permanent. And I think this is quite obvious based on the results I just presented. I won't dwell on it, but I'd like to leave it open for the Q&A part of the session. Regarding the unclear roles and rights and responsibilities and the important structural differences I've observed I'd like to start with the second, because this clearly shows that we need to have a holistic understanding of the problem, and that this is a multidimensional problem that cannot be fully addressed without holistic responses that involve stakeholders at all levels, from the EU level to the national regional authorities, to the universities, departments, research groups, and to the researchers and their representatives. Only by having a coordinated action that considers all levels and different dimensions of the problems, because the results clearly show that this is a multi-layered problem, we can arrive at solutions that adequately address the problem. And obviously, no adequate solution can be found if we do not have answers to this key question. What is a postdoctoral researcher? Specifically, what are the roles these researchers are expected to perform? What is the role of this career stage in research careers? What measures do we need to take to ensure they are recognized as an autonomous staff category? And this question is also clearly related to the other 2 points that are the key conclusions that we get from these results: adverse conditions for career progress and overall absence of career support. And what we recommend is that career structures, research careers, are restructured and or created. And when doing this restructuring of the careers, we ensure diversity of career options. And this diversity of career options needs to consider a diversity of roles inside academia research careers. For example, staff scientists, data scientists, meaning that we need to clearly know who are postdocs and what are the roles they are expected to perform. Also, a diversity of career paths inside and outside academia. What should the PhD prepare doctoral candidates for? What kind of roles? What kind of career paths? And when we think about diversity of career paths, we also need to ensure that intersectoral mobility, it's a two-way path and not a one-way path as it currently exists. Finally, it's also very important to ensure access to career support, professional development, and other career development opportunities for postdocs. And this taps these 2 points tap directly into the topic of the conference, doctoral training. And I particularly like this document from the European Commission, Principles for Innovative Doctoral Training, which specifically states that doctoral training must be embedded in an open research environment and culture and should ensure exposure to industry and other relevant employment sectors. And in the document, industry is used in the widest sense, including all fields of future workplaces and public engagement, from industry to business, government, NGOs, charities, and cultural institutions. And again, this is a citation. So it's quite important that this is not forgotten. And in many ways, this is already at the heart of many of the transformations that are happening at the doctoral training level. But sometimes this wide sense of industry seems to be a little bit forgotten. And this is it, Matt. Thank you all for listening. I'm open to your comments and research and questions, which I see are already started to pop up in the chat. Sorry for being so fast, but I had a lot to say in a short time.
Thank you, Filomena. Yeah, you really went through, I mean, I know the depth of the survey data, so you did a tremendous job at giving a fantastic overview, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to seeing the report in depth. We don't have time for questions just yet, but there were some posted in the Q&A that I think you would be well positioned to answer, Filomena. So when you had time to catch your breath, see if you can address some of Sina's topics. So moving on to our next speaker, Marco Masia. So Marco works at the intersection between research, innovation, and policy. He's experienced in research and in the development of small and large organizations, and is the executive coordinator of the Initiative for Science in Europe, ISE, a non-profit based in Strasbourg and representing European scientific societies and research organizations, which count Eurodoc as a member. ISE is actively involved in a conversation with relevant stakeholders related to researchers' careers, but also to open science and bridging the gap between EU 13 and EU 14 countries in the process known as widening participation. So Marco's talk is entitled Time to Address the Problem of the Precarity of Academic Careers. So over to you, Marco.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for having me here and inviting me to present the position of ISE. I will make a very quick introduction. Let me share my slides. Just a second. Okay. I hope you all get the slides right now. So yes, as you said, I'm executive coordinator of Initiative for Science in Europe, and we have recently been very active on the topic of academic precarity. So just a very quick introduction about Initiative for Science in Europe. It gathers together learner societies and research organizations, where learner societies are mostly scientific societies with a definite discipline and direction. So, for example, we have the European Physical Society, plant science organizations, chemical society, and so forth and so on. We have from different disciplines, both from STEM and from SSH. Apart from that, we also have members representing young researchers, which was something that we were missing. And these organizations are Eurodoc, and then the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and the Young Academy of Europe. So I would like to give you just a very quick background of where I come from here and what has happened for the last year. So in winter, we published a report about precarity just in academia. And I would like to highlight this because, of course, precarity of research careers is a very wide topic. It's super complex, as Filomena also showed. And we wanted just to focus only on academic careers. And then we organized a series of panel discussions which were broadcasted online during February and March. All of these resources are available on our website if you are interested in knowing more about that. So we consider that academic careers are complex issues, right? And as Filomena said, when you look at careers in the academic sector, you shouldn't restrict yourself only to career as a principal investigator. But nowadays, and mostly in future, given the transition of universities to cover, let's say, a broader scope, and also in the transition to open science, right? There will be new roles that can be and should be covered by researchers, and possibly with a doctoral degree, because they have a better understanding of the topics. Okay, the other piece found is the OECD report that was also mentioned by Filomena, where they recognize that this precarity of academic careers is of high concerns because it's now hindering our let's say, research and innovation capacity of many countries. Okay, so if we want to move ahead and quicker, probably having better employment perspective would attract more people to stay in academia, and then improve also on the quality of our research innovation system. And the other point that they make is that actually what happens nowadays is that people from minorities are very affected, and women too. So this is very important. Finally, the other part that is mentioned is that there is a need to change the research culture within academia. And a few weeks after, the European Council adopted these conclusions about improving conditions for research careers in Europe, okay? And it's a very nice document when they state important considerations about the current state of the art in Europe, and they asked the member states to use different to improve working conditions in academia. And finally, this is very recent, I would like to highlight the fact that there is constant commitment from also member states. So now the Slovenian presidency has put as one of the main 4 priorities the fact that they have to pledge for gender equality in research. And a very interesting phenomenon in witnessing recently in Germany is this movement with like Ich bin Hanna, which is mostly from the young researchers in Germany about the very grim perspective that they have for being employed in academia in future. This is basically a protest against a law that was actually proposed and put in place to support researchers in their careers, but then it backfired completely. And now what happens in Germany is that they have let's say fixed term contracts for a long time until they reach a limit of years that they cannot work anymore in academia, and then they have to look for a job outside. And just Germany is emblematic, because if you look at the evolution of fixed-term positions in time, this is just for Germany, okay? But you can see that while permanent positions have been stagnating since 1994 until now, all fixed-term positions have increased. And then in the graph on the right-hand side, you will see the relative proportion of one to the other. So in 1976, it was 15.7%. So 15.7% was the ratio between fixed term and over all positions, right? And now it is almost 3%. You see, so this is something that is really worrisome and needs to be fixed. And I don't have the data here, but similar trends are witnessed throughout all Europe. So where does this come from? It's, as I said, for Germany, in the recent year, since 2007, I think, it was also because this law passed, was put in place. But more in general, there is an approach of having project funding. So universities or research group gets funding for, let's say, 3 to 5, maybe 7 years, right? Just on projects. And they hire for those projects. Once the funding for the project is finished, then there are no options of being hired on longer term positions. Okay, so now this is becoming, in my opinion, and in opinion actually of our task force, very important. So we think that this balance needs to be reestablished. Okay, so member states, but also other funders and also the Commission should try to find a way of increasing funding for permanent position rather than only on a project base. Okay, and we should look this not only from the perspective of the researchers themselves, but also of the impact and efficiency of the research system. Consider that if you have funding only based on projects, there are a lot of costs that need to be covered. First of all is assessing the projects, right? So now it's becoming very competitive. So you get a lot of proposals that need to be assessed, and assessing this kind of proposals take a lot of resources. Not only you need huge resources to manage those projects, right? So it's also more efficient for a founder or for a government to actually manage funding that has a long-term perspective. And the final benefit that is very important is that, considering the way research works, if you only advance through projects, you basically slow it down a lot, because you get financing for one project, then you start learning about something with that project, but then you don't get any more funding afterwards, right? So it's very important for us, also the funders, understand that only project-based funding is not efficient. The other thing that we have noticed, and I forgot to say, and I would like to mention, we didn't run ourselves any survey. We based all our considerations on studies that were made by others, also the Eurodoc survey, but we used, let's say, we made a huge literary review for that. So another thing that we identified is very important are the research assessment practices. And this mentioned also earlier. So if we promote more qualitative judgment and consider also various research activities, so we don't focus only on the H index and on the impact factor, this might actually promote an healthier system and open up possibilities for more researchers, and not only for those who are let's say publishing with in high impact factor journals. And this is important because all these various research activities that are not measured by these metrics are societally relevant outputs sometimes, okay? So this is very important for the societal impact of research too. Again, I'm looking at it from a wider perspective. It's not only because the academic precarity is solved, but actually there are other benefits for the entire system. Finally, we identify the fact that research grant evaluations suffer for many biases. So in order to reduce those biases, it would be good to adopt novel approaches that guarantee more equity. So for example, multi-stage evaluation procedures, or what are commonly called lotteries or post-review randomizations, where you make a first screening by reviewing the proposals, but then since it's very difficult to distinguish a good to an almost good from an almost good proposal, those that are, let's say, within some range of grades are just drawn by in a lottery. So now I've put all the negativity about what's about academic careers and how hard it is, and also, as I mentioned, our recommendation. But there are some silver lining that I would like to mention. So nowadays there's much more awareness at every level, and by every level I mean from the doctoral candidates themselves, postdoctoral researchers, however you want to define them, universities, funders, governments. Okay, this is very important. So they are aware of that, and the background I gave was meant just to show that although it is of concern, now many organizations are talking more and more about that, and the conclusion of the European Council are very important in that direction. Just news from today, and I wanted to put it in my presentation, is that European Research Council signed DORA. So it goes in the direction of actually assessing research not only through the typical impact factor and H index, but with wider criteria. And I think that this is very important. Also, some universities have started adopting new assessment standards and transitioning to open science. I would like to mention that recently Utrecht University declared that they dropped completely the use of impact factors, and also UCL is well ahead in this process. Other universities are there too. Okay, there is the commitment of EU institutions, and this is very important. So this is top down. Okay, it is important that there is this commitment and they support research communities. It's very important that they still have a dialogue with research communities to understand how best they can support them. There is a broader adoption of lotteries in grant evaluation. So one of our recommendations, actually also the Swiss funder recently declared that they would use it for some kind of proposals. And then, as it was mentioned earlier, also on the although this is not one of our recommendation, we consider this is very important, that doctoral candidates are trained on different transferable skills or soft skills. Here, I just called skills in general, and there are European projects going in that direction, like the DocEnhance project, and we'll have speakers soon about that, and the DOZ project. So I think that this is very relevant. And with this, I stop my presentation. I don't know if the Q&A is after, I guess, so happy to take questions later on.
Thanks very much, Marco. Can I just quickly ask whoever has blocked me from switching my camera on to unblock me? That would be nice. So it's clearly I'm not actually the most welcomed moderator today. So until that's done, you'll have to just listen to my extremely posh British accent introducing the next speakers today. Yes. Great, there we go. Not that it's too important, but thank you so much, Marco. And yes, we'll continue the dialogue in the Q&A. Thanks again for really capturing the essence of Precarity, in particular Ich bin Hanna, which I think has exploded onto our mobile phones through Twitter in the last few days and weeks. So our third talk today comes from Alexandra Bitusikova and Kamila Borsekova from Matej University in Slovakia. So Alexandra is a professor in social anthropology and head of the University Center for International Projects. She's a visiting scholar once of the UK and the US, and also used to work in the European University Association's Council for Doctoral Education, working on activities related to pan-European reforms to doctoral education. Kamila is coordinator of research at Matej University, as well as head of the R&I Center at the Faculty of Economics. An experienced project leader, Kamila is a member of several Slovak and international science academies and has provided extensive consultation for a variety of projects on urban and regional topics. Today, we welcome both in giving their talk in tandem on transferable skills in doctoral education, experience from the DocEnhance project. So over to you both, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Matthew. Very nice introduction. Thank you very much. So we are representing here today DocEnhance project. We are not coordinator, but just a partner. But our coordinator is on vacation, so we take this opportunity to talk to you about the DocEnhance project. So we will just very briefly introduce you the project and its most important results. So can I move my slides, or someone will do that? I'm not sure. Matthew, probably. Thank you. So you can go to the next slide. So I will just very briefly introduce you the project and its overall goal. The overall goal of the DocEnhance project is to develop a diverse network of academic and non-academic actors with aim of co-creating open educational resources in transferable skills. DocEnhance will provide all project outputs free of charge through an open online platform to enhance skills intelligence and integration, and to increase cost efficiency, equality, and harmonization of doctoral education across Europe and beyond. The provided open educational resources will focus on transferable skills and facilitate cooperation and innovation with the non-academic sector to achieve by this possible applicability and impact for the project outcomes. DocEnhance project is a 36 months project, and it is organized into 5 educational work packages from 1 to 5, and as you can see on the slide, and is supplemented by a work package dedicated to dissemination and exploitation, and one overarching project coordination and management work package. We can move to the next slide. I will just very briefly tell you about the methodology of the project. The project methodology is based on co-creation approach, skills intelligence, and skills integration with overarching iterative approach. The skills identification and prioritization, development of course content, implementation and evaluation of pilot courses, and the integration of resources on the DocEnhance platform will follow an iterative process with 2 loops to ensure that the main DocEnhance outputs are relevant and ready to use when the project ends. Each of the loops are followed by stakeholder workshops to evaluate and validate the interim prototypes of the DocEnhance platform and its content. We can go to the next slide. We will now present the most important results so far, and my colleague Sandra will begin with this part.
Thank you very much. Yes, so the project is in its first half, so we don't have all results yet, but we will present at least those which are already finished. So first thing, of course, we had to do, as we all do in the beginning of every project, is some overview of literature, existing scientific literature, as well as all reports, either national reports or EU reports on transferable skills. So we did this overview. It was actually our task, Kamila's and mine, and we did it based on this overview of literature. We did also a set of good practice recommendations, of course, based on good practice examples from research projects, from literature, and also based on experience from all DocEnhance partners and partner universities and institutions. So this was the first, we can say, outcome and first deliverable, which you can find on DocEnhance website, and I will add it later in the chat. Next, please. What was very interesting, we did this set of regional stakeholder workshops because, of course, you are all aware of the fact that doctoral candidates do need not only research and scientific skills, but also these transferable skills. But these skills may differ in different sectors. So different sectors require something else from you. If you decide that you want to do only applied research somewhere in big industry or small and medium enterprise, you will need slightly different skills, at least some, than the person who wants to save the world in the non-government organization, for instance. So at the very beginning, of course, when the project was designed, the proposal was designed, we identified 4 sectors which represent some crucial societal challenges of the 21st century. So the first sector was industry in its broad sense, industry, business, small and medium enterprises and large industries. That was the first. Second was technology and innovation. Third sector was non-governmental, third sector. And fourth sector was actually data stewardship, big data management, and skills needed in this kind of rather new sector. So we organized these regional stakeholder workshops in 4 countries. Of course, it was at the very beginning of the pandemic, so we managed, for instance, Kamila and myself, we did use the end of last summer and managed to do it offline, live, our workshop, but most of other workshops were organized online, but that doesn't matter. There were quite interesting results. So we had groups of people from these 4 identified sectors discussing what, in a very interactive way, what skills are needed in your sectors. Next, please. So this is probably the most interesting result of these 4 workshops. As you can see, one was in Finland, technology innovation in Spain, non-profit in Slovakia, and data-driven sectors, data stewardship in Norway. As you can see in blue colors, of course, there are certain transferable skills which these groups independently decided that are important in every sector. And we can, of course, agree: communication, presentation skills, adaptability, motivation, teamwork, language skills. You can see them almost in every of these 4 columns, and some are specific. So, for instance, as we organized non-profit sector workshop, we could hear and discuss that people who want to work in non-profit sector and really are very much passionate about some topic, let's say human rights or animal rights or whatever there are, climate change, and want to do in this kind of non-profit sector, they usually have not only very strong motivation, but usually they have some sort of empathy, some social responsibility feelings. Ethical issues are important here. Of course, as the non-profit sector works mainly on projects, is based on projects because funding usually comes from various projects, not governmental funding. So you must have good management skills and project skills, project management, project finance, financial management, and creativity. So you must be good at writing projects, for instance. So these were also things discussed at our workshop. But as you can see, in each of these sectors, there are some very specific skills which are needed. But of course, we know that it's just very important for each doctoral candidate to have an idea where I would like to work in the future, whether it's really an academic sector where we know that there are not very many positions in academia, or is it really very applied research in some industry, or is it a startup which I want to set up and I will need certain skills to know how to do it and to be self-employed and to innovate in various areas? Or do I want to save the world and work in non-profit sector? Or, of course, this very big new idea with big data, robotics, data management, metadata management, including text data mining. You can see that there are a lot of very specific skills in this emerging sector. Okay, next, please. So this was one part which was already finalized, and we published a report on these regional stakeholder workshops, and most of these deliverables are on our website. Another task within this work package was, and still is, it's an ongoing task, is a career tracking survey, which we suppose will have quite interesting responses because it was launched in March and it was already closed in half April this year. And we collected more than 2,220 responses from 9 participating universities. You can see these universities on the slide. And it was rather a long questionnaire with quite precise, detailed questions, 60 to 70 questions in 8 different sectors. So the response rate, 25%, is rather good, I think, taking into account that it was rather long and people don't have time these days to reply and to fill in long questionnaires. So we don't have the results yet because they are analyzed at the moment. What we already can say is that it was interesting for me to see that about 93% of these respondents in this questionnaire said that if they would have to decide again whether to do PhD or not, they would do it again, which I found quite a nice answer. 93% is quite a lot. But of course, almost half of respondents work in jobs which do not require PhD, which is also quite a high percentage. So this is just the invitation for you, these first responses, to have a look when the survey results are out. And I will give the floor now to Kamila and she will continue. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Next slide, please. The results that we already presented are used for a pilot courses design. DocEnhance has developed a flexible and innovative module-based organizational framework for the design and implementation of courses in transferable skills that includes exposure to non-academic sector and enables interdisciplinarity and international networking. Due to the module-based framework, the participating doctoral candidates can attend one or more modules, tailoring the course to their interests, needs, and opportunities. The same build-up of the courses across several universities in Europe will make it possible to interlink modules from different universities and encourage collaboration across space and time, and increase networking, mobility, interdisciplinarity, and innovation among disciplines, sectors, and countries. The 3 modules are designed to foster open education, interdisciplinarity, and mobility, and the respective methods to achieve these goals are online lectures, local group work, and regional assignments with the non-academic sector. All these courses, regardless of subject, will be aligned to the principles of open science and innovation. By building the courses around this concept and methods, we aim to build the capacities of participants while they are training in specific skills. I can also mention that the project creates pilot courses on 3 thematic areas: data stewardship, career management and entrepreneurship, and supervision. The broad interdisciplinary and sectoral applicability of these thematic areas allows for flexibility in the co-creation process, as the aim is that the learning outcomes will be defined and developed in co-creation with relevant stakeholders. The pilot courses will be built with the 3 modules of DocEnhance Transferable Skills course concept to foster capacity building with the specific skills training within these 3 chosen thematic areas. Next slide, please. Here you can see the implementation of pilot courses. The first round of piloting is almost completed now in July, and the second round of pilots will start in spring 2022. Then we will collect reports on all courses piloted, and we will also produce good practice recommendation for DocEnhance courses concept implementation. Next slide, please. As already Sandra mentioned, we are just in the first half of the project, so our next step will be to present and produce career tracking survey results. This career tracking survey was oriented towards doctoral candidates or doctoral candidates that already finished their doctoral studies in the last 5 years. Then we will finish first iterative loop and we will starting second one as I present at the beginning of the presentation. We will test and design DocEnhance platform and reach DocEnhance network, and of course we will try to disseminate and exploit the results produced by the project. Next slide, please. If you would like to find out more, you can follow us on the social networks or subscribe to our newsletter or visit our website. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks to you both. Once again, I am a bodiless voice. So I much appreciated Alexandra and Kamila for that fantastic introduction of DocEnhance, and in particular trying to capture the scene in multiple sectors in multiple countries. So we look forward to some Q&A on that. Sorry to rush on, and we will get to some questions in the meantime, so keep popping them in the chat, or rather in the Q&A box, and we'll get round to them. So our final talk of the day comes from Apostolia Karamali, or Leah, as she is also known. Leah is the head of the Research and Innovation Actors and Research Careers Unit at the Directorate General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission. So the unit designs and implements policy for the higher education sector, research organizations, researchers, and various dedicated infrastructures. Operating within the European Research Area, or ERA, which you've heard of before, the unit is particularly focused on bolstering research careers, developing a sustainable research ecosystem, and maintaining observatory on knowledge creation, circulation, and then its use. So I've been especially excited to hear more about new principles for the ERA, and particularly on Leah's talk today, entitled Towards a European Framework for Research Careers. So that's enough from me. Over to you, Leah, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much. And just to inform you that I'm experiencing some connection difficulties, so I hope my connection will hold. In the worst case, I will take out my camera just in case. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today. Thank you for the introduction, Matthew. I followed with a lot of interest the previous presentations, very informative. And I think it's very important to have these kind of gatherings in order to understand the needs of the sector and to further debate about policy actions that are meaningful and useful. So in my presentation, I will update you on the policy context, as Mathew already introduced, from the ERA perspective, and also more specifically about research careers. So if we can move to the next slide, please. I have just one slide to talk about challenges for researchers, as everything has been quite eloquently already presented. So of course, researchers face, we can distinguish the challenges of the researchers face at 3 levels. One level which is aligned to the broad challenges of our society, one level which is aligned to the challenges of the labor market, and one level which is more research and innovation specific. So more broadly, our society in general is faced with the challenges for the twin transitions, the green and the digital, in addition to the need for resilience and recovery from the pandemic, of course. And therefore, this also applies to researchers. So researchers would need to align themselves, especially the young generation, to these broader societal trends. And we are in a quite important transition at the moment. Of course, researchers also face the broader challenges of the labor market as highly skilled workers, as qualified in the different statistical offices, and I will come back to this point later on. And researchers need to, the labor market has specific needs for the skill set, especially coming from industry. There are still mismatches reported. So how do we address this? What is the role of the institutions? How can researchers be better prepared? And of course, there are research-specific challenges, such as the ones already mentioned by previous speakers. For example, the predominance of project-based funding as opposed to institutional funding, the different conditions attached to the project-based funding, research assessment, the evolution of research assessment, the transition towards open science, all these are specific challenges for research, for researchers. So how do we respond to this? So I take a step back and I will update you on where we stand with ERA, and then I will go back to discuss more specifically about researchers. So last year has been a quite intensive year in terms of policy documents from the Commission, and also quite proactive discussion with the Council. The Commission took a broad approach by adopting a package oriented towards knowledge. So the package was composed with a Commission communication on the European Research Area, the education package on the European education area, the digital education action plan, and the skills agenda. So taking a holistic approach to knowledge from basic science up to lifelong learning, and addressing all cycles of education as well. More specifically for ERA, if we can move to the next slide. This was followed by Council conclusions under the German presidency, of course, putting research careers and researchers at the heart of the political orientations. And this was followed also by an intensive discussion in the first semester of this year under the Portuguese presidency on research careers, and with a specific attention to early career researchers. Also, in the first half of this year, there have been quite intensive discussions with member states regarding the new Pact for Research and Innovation under the newly established platform of the ERA Forum for Transition, bringing together member states and the Commission to discuss the way forward for the new era, and particularly how to bridge the Commission proposals, the Council orientations that came from the conclusion, into a consensual and practical approach on the way forward that allows us to join forces between European and national level in delivering the ERA objectives. So after a lot of discussions, including, of course, consultation of stakeholders, including organizations such as yourselves, the Commission is now about to adopt a proposal for the Pact for Research and Innovation, which will then be transmitted to the Council for formal adoption of a Council recommendation. What is this Pact for Research and Innovation? It is a high-level document that is composed of 4 important chapters. One chapter that lists principles and values that are to be adhered at different levels in Europe, and which are more specific to research. A chapter on big areas of action, bringing together many items and grouped under 4 main objectives, in particular specific to the research innovation system, but also linking research to the economy and also supporting access to excellence, among others. Then it has a chapter on investments and reforms, and we have the commitment to the 3% of GDP, but additional investment targets are under discussion. And finally, a governance mechanism in order to have effective delivery of these actions. In addition to this pact, there is also ongoing discussion on the policy agenda. The policy agenda would bring together concrete action items for the action areas listed in the pact, and we will find ourselves in the coming years in 2 to 3 year cycles trying to implement specific actions. So say that a big area is about researchers and research careers. What can we do concretely in the next 2 years to come between union and national level? This is quite innovative with respect to previous practices, and the idea is really to converge towards delivering results from a policy perspective. So this is where we stand from an broader era perspective, just to position you in the broader context. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. What is the overall thinking on research careers? So the current discussion is about building a European framework for research careers, which addresses the 5 building blocks that you can see on this slide. The building block, which is synergies with employment and social policy, a building block with synergies on education policy, especially the higher education, research policy, a building block oriented on talent, and finally support services such as observatory of careers and flows. And let me say a few words more specifically about those building blocks. I would like to stay specifically on the first building block. So I was saying before that researchers are highly skilled workers when seen from the labor market. However, we also have in parallel many informal recognitions of the research profession, informal in the sense that they are not part of the national taxonomies and the national statistical offices. And therefore, one action that is pursued under this part is an action which is oriented towards the recognition of the profession. And we are doing this through the update of the taxonomies of skills and the national taxonomies. And I will come back to that afterwards. The second important area is the broader working conditions, in particular the social protection aspects, including pensions, the minimum wages initiative from the Commission addressing the workers in the labor market more broadly, as well as mobility within the labor market with the application of the directive on students and researchers. For the higher education, we're working towards a future Commission communication on the universities, and I will come back to this. On research policy, the important part is the way forward with the Charter and Code and transforming it into something which is a framework addressing the current challenges for researchers. when we talk about actions or oriented on talent, we want to deploy a new initiative called ERA for You, which will facilitate intersectoral mobility across the EU. And we want to transform Euraccess into an ERA talent platform. Next slide, please. So I was saying that a very important milestone this year was the adoption of Council conclusions under the Portuguese presidency, which can be found downloadable in the link that you can see in this slide. And in these Council conclusions, many aspects, the conclusions took a holistic approach. And you can see in the next slide an extract from the press release that the Council adopted, providing a few highlights about the content of these conclusions. For example, addressing the broader framework conditions, the interoperability and comparability of research careers, using European universities as a test bed to deploy new actions, and finally an attention on skills, and as was discussed previously by previous speakers. So if we can go 2 slides forward, please. The next, thank you. So a few words about where we stand on universities. So I was saying before that we are planning a Commission communication on the future European strategy for universities, establishing a vision on the future of universities, taking a holistic approach on all missions of universities, research and innovation, education, service to society, identifying a roadmap of actions and synergies between European and national level. And you can see on the right-hand side how the Council has positioned itself about the broad building blocks that this strategy should include, in particular aspects linked to the digital and green transition, international aspects, in the importance of values, the importance of employment, employability, inclusion, and next to that we have also conclusions from ERA addressing excellence and research careers. In the next slide, we can see where we stand with the skills aspect. So we are in the process of developing a competence framework for researchers, including a taxonomy for skills recognized at the national law level. So this hopefully will help us identify researchers as a distinguished category in the national taxonomies, and therefore subject to, indirectly subject to employment conditions applicable at national law. We're faced here with a diversity, which is the fact of Europe, a diversity of conditions, working conditions in different member states. And therefore, we need to adapt to this reality in order to provide, to help with the precarity considerations that were raised before. In the next slide, you see also the state of play of our work with the Charter and Code. So the Charter and Code dates back to 2005. It is a document that lists values for the working conditions of researchers. This document has been recognized by over 1,200 institutions across the EU, with 600 research institutions having developed human resources strategies and action plans applying this concretely for researchers. This is an ongoing process, and we're currently assessing together with the Council, the next steps for the Charter and Code. And you can see, I invite you to read also in the Council conclusions, the invitation, the political invitation of the Council that the Charter and Code in the future should include concrete actions in support of the challenges of researchers within academia, such as the one I mentioned before, tenure tracks, research assessment, career diversification, but also outside academia, incentives to recruitment of early career researchers, for example, in industry, among other things. Then, of course, in the next slide, the reform of the research assessment system is very much on the agenda. I need not repeat what has already been mentioned. So concretely, in terms of next steps, we're looking towards an important MOU, an agreement in 2022, some sort of coalition of the direction to go. And then we expect to pilot some actions through universities as a first step. and then we have to see, take stock of this analysis and see how to proceed further. Then in the next slide, we can see the state of play with the evolution of EURACCESS. So we're looking towards the development of a European talent platform. Here we want to transform the portal and the network of portal of EURACCESS, taking advantage of AI techniques and analytics in order to have a more social media-like digital marketplace for researchers and employers. We want to regroup the network and to have more teams that offer services towards researchers and establish communities of practice. So this is ongoing under the broader term of ERA Talent Platform. And finally, 2 slides on my side. Of course, all this is about policy. However, the encouraging trends is that we see a very increased attention under the Recovery and Resilience Facility for funding, research funding, including scholarships and fellowships. So this will create important opportunities for researchers, and these are coupled also with reforms. So hopefully there will be a possibility in order to have, let's say, a more innovative approach towards these kind of funding opportunities. And there were interesting ideas that were raised today. And last slide on my side, and I apologize if I take a couple of minutes more. Horizon Europe, the first work programs were published. We had our info days in the last 2 weeks. And of course, beyond the traditional funding opportunities for researchers under ERC and MSCA, and of course EIT, I want to flag the novelty under widening an era, the cross-cutting part of Horizon Europe, where we are rolling out a new scheme for fellowships under the brain circulation part of widening. And we have tentatively included for the moment 2 topics. One, which continues the widening fellowships of Horizon 2020 for the coming 2 years, so this year and next year, and the new one on talents, where we expect to introduce some new features, improving, let's say, also intersectoral mobility. So just a teaser for you, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Leah, and thanks to all of our speakers for keeping to time too. We have a little opportunity now for a Q&A, of which we've had a few questions, some comments in the actual Q&A box. I think there's one question that we can perhaps quickly address to Filomena. Maybe we could ask all the panelists to switch on their cameras so we can have everyone present. So maybe Filomena, if you could very quickly answer what you thought the percentage ratio of survey participants in the survey you mentioned was compared to the total number in Europe. I have my own answer in my head, but over to you.
Sorry, I'm with my camera off because I'm blocked. I cannot turn my video on. So if someone in the background could do it for me, it would be great. This is okay. Okay. Now I have video. So this is a very hard question to answer because, as I said, and it was in one of my slides, we are now there's now multiple evidence that these researchers are undercounted. So and then if you look at statistics, there are so many different categories that in which they show or may show, and some may even not show in statistics because of what Apostolia just said, informal categories that are not formally recognized. So the actual number is very hard to know for sure. What I can tell you for sure is that this is one of the largest surveys conducted in Europe. And to add to the complexity, for me to give you a ratio, is that we have respondents from 30 countries, which means that this goes clearly beyond the EU. So this is another complexity to give you an answer of the ratio. It may seem a lot, and then if we put this into thousands or even millions, it may seem not so good. But again, it's one of the largest surveys conducted at the European level with these characteristics.
Yeah, thanks. And it's absolutely a strength of Eurodoc that it has that capacity to permeate sometimes through networks of researchers that perhaps conventional institutions and infrastructures don't have the freedom to do, particularly because it's about personal referrals in many ways too. So thanks very much. If there are any questions from Barling Hall, then I think our Czech representatives on site have a microphone available. Otherwise, I believe we have a question from Nicola on who's attending virtually. So if one of the technicians wants to introduce Nicola, they're more than welcome. Otherwise, I can move on to a broad question for everyone then, whilst Nicola's being admitted. So this is a question really that hopefully everyone can contribute something to. At which levels can research career policy be best orchestrated? And I think it kind of is encapsulated in what Leah just presented. Would you say it's at an institutional level, a national or an international level, that you can see the most easy governance of research career policy? So that's free for any of the panelists to answer.
Sorry, you said international, national, and
institutional.
And institutional.
Marco, take it away.
Yeah, maybe I just can start, because we are making this consideration within ISC for what concerns research assessment, in particular research assessment of open science practices. So it is, let's say, a very tiny topic related to researchers' careers in general, but still there are many stakeholders involved, right? So who would be the ones driving? That's the main question. And we have actually run a series of interviews with different stakeholders, and we have met many stakeholders in an expert workshop. It was a 2-day workshop, and the answer is not that straightforward, because the problem is that if it's too top down, like everything from the institutions, like the Commission or the member states, government, whatever, if it is too top down, it's usually not well accepted by the community, because it looks like imposed and very bureaucratic sometimes, right? And otherwise, the ideal would be to be bottom up, but usually there are many different research communities, right? Each of them with their needs, and it's difficult to organize them. So my personal conclusion, not the conclusion of ISC yet, but my personal conclusion is that actually there should be like a coordination of all these stakeholders. And I think that institutions, and by institutions, I mean, let's say government or the Commission or universities or funders, right? All of them should support the research communities, providing them the tools to find a solution that is commonly agreed by everybody. That's my idea.
Thanks. Yeah, and Leah, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I think I partly addressed this in my presentation, but let me say that, of course, I fully agree with the previous speaker. It is indeed, it has to be the result of a joint effort. It has multiple dimensions. Multiple dimensions also, both geographically, but also in terms of people and institutions, as already explained before. Definitely the example raised before, the reform of the research assessment cannot bear fruit if it is not addressed also internationally, so it is something of global reach. When it comes to what the public sector can do, there are limitations. Of course, we're talking about creating enabling conditions and working on framework conditions, working with the diversity of the working conditions across the different member states, launching measures that can stimulate certain trends. but it should be also the higher education institutions that should engage, I would say, furthermore, in particular industry and other actors, of course, because here we need to address the broader labor market. So I would like to insist on that point. And of course, we need the buy-in also from researchers themselves towards this transition. So definitely many challenges ahead, quite complex aspects here.
Yeah, very overlapping in many senses. And Filomena, you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, and I would just like to add something, because we are talking for an audience of early career researchers, and obviously this also how to make, because it's not enough for institutions, government, the EU, to make the policies. The policies need to be brought to life. And that also requires individual researchers to do their bit. And we all need to be engaged. And for example, our surveys already show that maybe our members could do something about what appears to be a lack of knowledge among some postdocs about fundamental rights in terms of contracts, about what kinds of roles they can or cannot have, what should be their roles when they start their contracts in the institutions they are at. Because change also entails these kinds of changes in how us early career researchers, but not only, do our jobs and see our roles in the institutions we work in. That was it.
Well spoken, yeah, and thanks for representing the early career researchers' voice. I think I'm getting messages actually from friends in WhatsApp and Twitter, and certainly the policy landscape is a bit unwieldy and confusing for most researchers, and many would actually like to be able to place themselves within that context. And let's hope that in some of these widening actions that, as Leah said, there is an effort to try and bring a greater literacy of the framework that operates now and one of the future. So I think now we have Nicholas. So if you would like to switch on your camera and mic, yeah, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions, but really the first one that I would love to ask is to Leah. And it is clear to me that Euraccess is a fantastic opportunity and a really powerful infrastructure. But I was wondering how to promote the use of Euraccess to early stage researchers. And another question is how to engage employers about skills in general, how to bring together and bridging the academia with the industry sector or even public administration, which is something difficult by itself. I was wondering how to do that in order to make the skills really of researchers richer in a way.
So, shall I respond directly, Mathew?
Yes, sorry, yes, I was nodding.
Yeah, okay. Right, so let me start with Euraccess. So Euraccess is indeed a success story in the sense that we have managed to deploy a network which is now present in 40 countries, so all EU member states, associated countries. We have 8 international hubs, so it's huge. Huh? And every country has its own national portal, and we have a European portal. So a complex network of portals, a complex network of presence in different member states, different cities, and also internationally. We have also tried to have, let's say, a series, at least some basic services, for example, publications of jobs and so on. However, it is clear that Euraccess needs to evolve and it has to become more dynamic and as I was saying before, especially profiting from AI technology and so on. Of course, this cannot happen by magic overnight, but we're working towards this transformation. And for example, I mentioned before, having a portal which is more media-like, it has a more dynamic marketplace between job seekers and employers, which is more, let's say, like what we actually need today. Many have used the example of LinkedIn, for example. So this is something that could be a very concrete way forward, and it takes, of course, and we have foreseen investment towards this direction. Of course, there are many issues regarding data protection and so on that need to be taken on, and we need to foresee its evolution. So currently, just to say that we have an ongoing discussion with member states in order to improve the type of services, the portal dimension, and also the network. So how member states address these people, let's say, that offer these services. So with the objective to reinforce, and there is also investment available in order to improve this. So this is the first question. And regarding the second question, regarding engaging employers and the skills issue. So I was saying before that it is regularly reported by industry that there is a mismatch, a skills mismatch. And therefore, this begs the question of how we can improve this. And I think there have been numerous initiatives which are more project-based on how to improve this. And the question is, can we also foresee by design some policy measures that will further facilitate this interaction between employers and researchers? For example, the industrial doctorates have been piloted under MSCA. Can we envisage in the future service level agreements in order to foresee specific, let's say, intersectoral mobility between academia and industry? Also, as I was saying before, from a policy perspective, business creation has to enter into this equation, given that in the European single market, there is a very strong presence of SMEs, and therefore the spin-offs from universities and how researchers can transform their ideas into value is also another interesting perspective. It happens. The question is how to expand and scale up. It's not about reinventing the wheel. So just some elements of reply on my side.
Thanks very much. And actually, that's a nice segue, I guess, to Sandra and Kamila. I wanted to probe you on the idea of skills literacy, which probably is a core pillar of what you guys are doing. What do you think are the obstacles on the part of the researcher, maybe structural, maybe personal and emotional, to being able to properly articulate those skills? So sometimes it's a question of actually being able to self-describe that you possess that skill. So what barriers do you think that you encountered in the DocEnhance project and beyond that?
Well, it's a good question, and you are right that often doctoral candidates do learn many skills by doing research, but they are unable to recognize them and identify them and call them, give them certain names. So it is also very important, of course, for supervisors, for doctoral schools and programs to give doctoral candidates this awareness that you already do know these skills, and you can mention them, of course, this. However, I unfortunately still think that supervision remains a challenge. Maybe in some countries it is better than in others, but it really, you can find all levels of quality of supervision. And we didn't mention that, but one of our tasks was actually to have course for supervisors. And we did it in several countries. The first one and the second one will be in a few months' time. And yes, you can see that supervisors, especially, I must say, and I belong unfortunately to the category of all the supervisors or senior ones, that I can see that it is better, I think, with younger supervisors and their awareness of these issues, but often with the older school of supervisors, or at least I can talk for eastern or central part of Europe, it is quite a big challenge. And I can even maybe mention the question which I already answered to Brian, one of our participants in the Q&A section, who asked whether, for instance, doctoral candidates are well prepared for this data stewardship sector, which is a growing huge sector in not only, you don't need to be only IT person, you can be a social scientist and you still need skills in this data management, big data area. And no, I answered, I do think that supervisors are not prepared to teach these skills. And many doctoral schools and universities suffer in knowledge about this. That's why it's so important to cooperate with various other sectors, for instance, or other institutions who are good in these things, because at universities often you will not find enough knowledge about how to manage this and how to transfer it to students, doctoral candidates. I don't know whether Kami wants to add something.
Actually, I do, and I had raised my hand precisely because of that, because for many, many years, for as long as I can remember, that, and as Mathew said, I've been volunteering for Eurodoc for a very long time, that Eurodoc recommends training for supervisors, but somehow it's been always something that no one really noticed. And over the years, there's one thing that I've realized, and that could really help start changing things, which is make supervisors, research groups, departments accountable for what happens to the doctoral candidates and the postdocs they train. What are the career plans, the career expectations, the preferences of these young researchers, of these early career researchers at the start of their PhD? How does it evolve over their training? What are the options they may have when they finish the doctoral training and then as postdocs? Because as long as there's no real accountability, those that are in the more senior positions will not really care. Some do, obviously, and a lot of them do, to be fair. And I wouldn't be as drastic to say the divide is between older and younger. I think it's a bit more complex than that. But in reality, accountability is key, in my point of view. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. Yeah, and Kamila, sorry, was there something you wanted to add on top of Sandra's intervention?
No, thank you. I think that Sandra is right, and I just can agree with all that was said here. Thank you.
And Marco, for the final word on this notion.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna have a bit of a controversial perspective. Consider that this is the Eurodoc Conference, but I totally agree that the role of supervisors is important, okay? But the main people accountable for their own development are the doctoral candidates, are the researchers themselves, okay? And this should be, I think, a very important message conveyed to all doctoral candidates, that they have to take ownership of their own development, okay? So most of European doctoral candidates are in universities which do not provide trainings on doctoral skills, or let's say the offer is quite poor, right? But nowadays, mostly thanks to internet, right? They can have access to very good training. They can have access to very good volunteering opportunities. So I can see that, for example, all the volunteers in Eurodoc have developed their own skills, mostly related to policy, right? But running a survey, analyzing it, making policy proposals, interacting with policymakers, these are very nice transferable skills that anybody can develop just if they have the interest to do that, right? And this is just the example of Eurodoc, but they can do communication, if they are interested in communication or leadership or whatever, right? So I think that this is a message that they should get. Of course, the support of the institutions and of the PI is super important, but they have to be the first ones to take the initiative.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. A nice topic, a nice theme to end on, the idea that we need to own our own careers, really. And whilst we can obviously seek a framework around it and supervision, ultimately there are decisions that can never be made by anyone but ourselves. So yeah, that's, in fact, we are now 10 minutes over. So it looks like we really have to round up the questions there. But thanks so much to our 5 speakers. That's Marco, Alexandra, Kamila, Leah, and Filomena. So I think we're going to hand back now to Prague. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to moderate this session. Thanks so much for all the chat and questions, some of which we have not got round to, so I apologize. If the panelists do wish to dip into any of the Q&A there, then they're more than welcome. But otherwise, that's all from me, and I'll pass back to Bowling Hall in Prague.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yay.
So thanks, Matthew, and thanks to all the speakers and all the moderators of the day. I think we've learned a lot of new, interesting facts and ideas that we will discuss this evening. So I would like to conclude this session with this, and also invite you for tomorrow, because we start the day with the session on open science, and then we continue with research integrity, and we will finish with mental health and work-life balance. So we wish to see you tomorrow as well. And now for the people that are here, we still have like one farewell drink for today for you prepared. So I hope we get to discuss a bit outside of the hall. Please take all your belongings with you, and see you tomorrow, and you as well.